Our next speaker has been building computer games for well, longer than some of us have been alive, actually. So that's pretty impressive. And with his more than 35 years of experience, he is currently president of Artcraft, working on Konsoll. Please welcome Gordon Walton.
Good morning. I have some questions for the audience first. Who's still drunk? Okay, very few people. How many people have never made a game in our audience? Okay, a few. How many people have less than 5 years making games? The vast majority. Okay. How many people have more than 10 years? Okay, very few. Okay, 4 or 5. Well, I'm with you. I've been making games a really, really long time, and I'm going to talk about kind of your long-term sustainability. How are you going to keep on making games year after year as everything around you changes? Because that's the real nature of our business. So I'm an old game guy, really old game guy. This is my 40th year of professionally making games. So my first game I made was in 1977, commercial game. Not my first game, game that actually got published. So I've been making games since cassettes were around, and then floppies, and then CDs, and now DVDs, and now the internet too. So I love making games, and I made a crap ton of games. I've managed a whole bunch more games. So I've made personally about 35 games, and I've managed close to 200 games getting made. So I've worked as a game developer. I was a programmer to start with, of course. I've worked as a third-party developer for big publishers. I've been in a big publisher managing third parties making games, and I've done internal development for big publishers. And today I'm working on a game called Konsoll, which is a massively multiplayer game as an independent. So we've independently funded it and independently made it after kickstarting it a couple years ago. And when I start to ask questions, everybody who asks a question can come up and grab a t-shirt or a hat or a collar shirt that I've got here. And anybody can get my card afterwards too if you want it, because I'm happy to help anybody anytime in the business. It's a hard business, so I like helping anybody I can. Let's see, so I've been doing this a really long time. And you can see at one time I looked like you guys. I was, skinny and, semi-handsome, but now I'm old and fat and bald, right? So this is what happens if you last long enough. But I did have a good time along the way. As you can see that center picture down there, we were making games in my living room of my house. That's in the early 80s, 1980s. We had a team of people building games way back then. Let's see, what are we going to talk about? And I think that the big issue is that we live in a world of very rapid change, and games are at the forefront of that world of change. We are kind of the cultural leading marker, and because of that, things are always changing in our world, and that change is accelerating like crazy. New platforms, new operating systems, new everything, and the consumers are changing just as fast as the technology changes. So the consumers, when a new platform comes out, you might notice this. The first games tend to be very simple games, very accessible, easy to put up on there. So you see a lot of arcade-ish games start. And over time, the audience matures on every platform, and they want more complex, more interesting, more difficult, sometimes more esoteric games than they wanted at the day one when that platform came out. I'm going to talk about how do you cope, how are you going to cope as life changes around you? The thing that we're sold culturally is, hey, I'm going to do something for a while. I'm going to get really good at it. I'm going to be on a plateau where I go, okay, I've mastered this. I'm now a master, and everybody else, I can help the apprentices become masters. The truth is, in our business, you never end up as a master. You may be a master for a year or 2 or even 3, but then the world's going to change, and you're going to have to fall right back down to the bottom of the hill and climb back up to remaster what's changed in our environment. So that's not very comforting, I'm sorry. about that, but it's been the truth for my entire career. And then how do you make a career out of this when it is so chaotic and so weird? How many people here have worked for more than 2 game companies? Okay, not very many yet. Okay, you'll get there. That's the nature of our business, and I'll talk about that. So, what's changed across all this time? In the beginning, it was pretty primitive. We didn't have anything to work with. The tools were terrible. The tools today are fabulous, and they're going to get better. How many people work with Unreal or Unity in the room? Okay, yeah, vast majority, right? To have that 20 years ago would have been a dream. It was a dream that we had, that we could have a tool that would actually work out of the box rather than having to build those engines almost every time we made a game. So we were rebuilding engines all the time just to make a game at all. The audience, too, has just been dramatically changing. So today, essentially, everyone under 40 has gamed who's in a first or second world country. Everyone under 40 has gamed at one point or another. So in the 80s, we were thinking, wow, we have a really cool, what we're doing is very cool. Wouldn't it be great if everybody was a gamer? Well, our wish became true. Now everybody's a gamer. And as soon as devices get to people, the second thing they do after whatever the device is for, that's an electronic device, the second thing they do is game on it. After, they buy it to talk on the phone, they buy it to do something else, and then immediately what do they do next? They play a game on it. So humans love to game, they love to simulate stuff, they love to be in places that they can't be any other way. So now we have the whole world is our audience, which is really kind of cool, right? It doesn't mean that you can get the whole world in one game, but there's so many sub-audiences within that giant group that you're going to be able to find somebody to do, who wants to play whatever you're going to build. So everything's easier. Everything's easier now. And at the same time, making games is damned hard, right? It's just very difficult. And it's about finishing stuff. It's about taking an idea, making it real, and then actually getting it done, which is always the trick, right? So how many people in here have finished a product? Actually shipped one? Okay, about a third of the people. That last part of shipping a product is always much more painful than you might think. It is a birthing process. And again, women have a second baby for only one reason. They forget the first baby, how bad that was. And we ship products the same way, right? We ship a product and we go, damn, that was terrible. And then we get excited about the next product, and then we go and get right back in the same place where it's going to be terrible at the end of that product too, to try to bring it to market. So it is the norm for creative people. Creative people want to bring their visions to life, and they're willing to make sacrifices to do it. And there is a lot of your essence that goes into every product that you make. What's wrong with our world? What's wrong with our world is because it's so easy, there's so much stuff. I can't play 1/10 of the games I'd like to play. I probably can't play 1/100th of the games I'd like to play. And if you're in the game business, you have even less and less time to play because you're too busy making games to play games. You play them, and after a while, you play them just to look at what the competition is doing. So this is a great way to ruin a perfectly good hobby. If you like playing games, start making games. It'll ruin your hobby completely because you can't help it, right? You're going to be deconstructing every game you look at because you make games. So you're going to go, no, I wouldn't have made that choice. That's a terrible choice in this game. Why did they do that? That's dumb. I would have done it this other way. And the longer you make games, the worse you get like that. You cannot help yourself, but deconstruct every game you look at, which means you'll never be immersed in a game again, which is horrible when you think about it. You build it for everyone else to be immersed in, but you cannot be. But I think that this noisy market issue is a big one. How do you stand out in a giant worldwide market with thousands of games being built almost daily now? It's hundreds of games are showing up on the App Store every day, which means that we're approaching the 1,000 game a day channel that, no one has even time to look at all 1,000 titles, much less actually play one or two of them every day. So it's really challenging, and we're going to talk a little bit about how do you do that? How do you go about, getting yourself noticed? What that part of what that means is that you've got to figure out more than making games. And a lot of people who make games are introverts at some level. You may be social within your small group, but you're not naturally outgoing, naturally, vivacious with other people. And the truth is, to do this well, you're going to need other skills than just the game-making skill. You're going to need to know how to create and foster communities around your work. If you were an artist in the Middle Ages, you would need patrons, right? Which means you probably have to talk to them, and you probably have to make sure that they were happy all the time. And in essence, our audiences are our patrons. They're the people who pay for us to make games. So we need to hold them close to us and cherish them and figure out how to make sure that they know what we're up to and that they're excited about it. You've got to figure out promotion and marketing. How many people, really don't like marketing? Okay, good third of it. You need to get over that, right? So, and I don't mean that you need to embrace being a marketer, but you need to know what marketing's about, and you need to respect the skill that's involved. So when I was making games in my early times, we always had kind of a love-hate relationship with marketing. We always thought, they don't know how to sell our game. They don't understand what it's about. Why are these dumb people selling our games? The truth is, if they didn't do their job right, it didn't matter almost how good our game was. Every once in a while, there's an exception, a game that rises above its bad marketing. But if you have bad marketing, you're probably not going to succeed, even if you have a great game. So it's really important to understand it well enough to where you can help those people be successful when you're working with them, the people who are going to market the games. And if you're going to be in business for yourself, you need to know how to hire and manage those people so that you can move your game forward, because you may need to do that. And again, how many people here run their own business or in a business where you're an owner of some kind? Okay, so about 10 or 15%. This is going to become more and more common. So even if you work at a big company, in your long-term plan, you may find a day where suddenly there's not a big company who wants you. What are you going to do? Are you going to get together with some friends and make a company? It would be better to be prepared if that's going to happen to you. So I, have my own company, then twice, and then I worked for companies for like 20 years. Actually, 3 times. I had my own company 3 times. And I worked for other companies for about 25 years total. So I had my own couple of companies. I worked for a company, then I had my own again. And then I finally, worked for companies for about 20 years straight, 19, I think. Worked for big companies, and then finally said, to hell with this. I'm going to go back and make my own company again. And it had been long enough for me to forget the process of making my own company for me to make my own company. Because it's just like everything else. It's really painful to do your own company. It's a whole bunch of work. It's a whole bunch of stuff that you don't like doing, that you have to do well enough to succeed, just so that you'll have the opportunity to make that game. Because again, making the game is a part of that. It's the center of it, but it's not the whole thing. So what's the strategies? So first thing is follow our market. Really figure out read about what's going on in the marketplace. Know what games are succeeding and why. Know which companies are succeeding and why. Know which ones are failing and why. So that you can get a sense of what the audience is doing with the games, what the companies are doing both right and wrong, so that you get a sense of what the context that you're operating in. If you're how many people are in the mobile market here? Mobile? Wow, not very many. PC and console? Okay, so mostly PC. That's interesting. So you need to study that market. And other speakers here have said that. By the way, haven't the speakers been fabulous so far? I go to conferences, and this has been the best speaker lineup, like one after another, that I've seen in a long time. So give all the other speakers a hand, not me. Because I've been very impressed. So I hope you guys have too. know who you're competing against. Hopefully you're not competing against anybody. Hopefully you're doing something unique enough to where you're really not in a hyper competitive space. Yes, you're competing for people's attention, but you're not head to head with somebody who has more money, more people, more everything else than you, because it's really hard to win when the other guy has a bigger supply train than you do and a lot more troops. So you don't want to be in that place. Don't let your skills stagnate. So one of the challenges, how many people in here work for big companies? Not very many. Not at all, almost. That's good, because when you work at a big company, here's what happens. They hire you for your specific skill, and they slot you in that slot, and then they use you. They never train you on the next stuff, and then one day they go, hey, we need people with a different skill, and they don't go to the people who've been with them all this time and say, hey, we'll retrain you. They say, let's hire some new people who have that skill and get rid of these people who don't have that skill. So the companies are not going to look out for you. You have to look out for yourself. You have to be thinking about your own skill set and making sure you're keeping it sharp all the time. You're learning from your peers. You're going to conferences like this. You're talking to the people who do what you do, and you're understanding what the state of the art is and how you can keep up. Very, very important. And that's the peer network. So things like this, your local IGDA chapter, your local gaming group, do that work. Even though a lot of times it feels like, okay, it's a little bit of a club thing and I have to talk to people and there's not enough drinking and there's too much talking, still go. Go. Keep in touch with your peers. Those are people you're going to work with off and on. So I'm currently in a company where it's about a third people I've worked with before, it's about a third people my partners worked with before, and about a third new people. So over time, as you work more in the game business, you get to know people who you go, wow, that person's really good. I want to work with them every time if I can. And you'll work with other people, you go, that was okay working with them, but I'm not jumping up and down to work with them one more time. Right? It would have to be a very special circumstance to work with them again. So finding out who your kind of buds are, your friends, who you go, these are people who I can count on, who will do their job, they will hold up their end so that the whole game gets made. And you also find out who are the finishers on the teams that you work on. Because a lot of people can do the work and not everybody can close a game, because closing means making a crap ton of hard choices that are very emotionally difficult to get a game finished. And so some people are more suited to that than others. And my experience is if your team doesn't have 15 to 20% closers, your game will never close. That's the way it works. So they will, continue to make the game for way too long. The first speaker, had a story about that, and maybe that wasn't about closing. Maybe that was more about finding the right game. So that's the other thing. Know where you're going is another thing, but you can't always know that, particularly when you're doing something brand new. There's a lot of R&D in our world and a lot of iteration, and that's part of what makes it fun and part of what makes it super difficult. You have to keep playing games, even if you don't have the time, even if you don't really like some of those games, you need to play the games. And the reason is we talk to each other in the language of other games. We don't actually have a game language that we talk about, here's how I'm designing the game. We say, oh yeah, we're doing this kind of like it was done in Darklands, or we're doing this kind of like it was done in Halo. We talk about games in the language of playing another game. So if you don't play games, you're actually not able to communicate with the other people on your team who are talking about the game you're making right now. So if you're making a game and there's reference games, everyone on your team should play those reference games well enough to speak that language of gaming. Until we actually come up with a game grammar one of these days where we can talk about it outside of games. I'm not thinking that's happening anytime very soon. Always look to be getting better. So, the people who scare me on the team are the people at the end of a game said, I did everything I could possibly do. I did 100% of what I could possibly do. I'm thinking those people are not recognizing any opportunity for improvement in what they did. So they didn't learn anything in this particular process that's going to make them better on the next process. I've never made a game ever where I got to the end of it and went, wow, I did everything I possibly could do. I can always look back and think of like 10 things I should have done, could have done better on that game. And then I try to apply that to the next game I work on. So always be thinking about, how am I going to do this better the next time? What did I learn from what I just did that's going to make me sharper, make me faster, make me more likely to do it right the first time the next time I try that? What new tools did I put in my toolbox that I can use on my next product? Again, stay involved with your peers. Stay involved with the people around you who make games. Stay involved with your countrywide gaming like this. Stay involved with the international gaming community if you can, because there's stuff to learn from other people. And one of the coolest things I think about games that we really started when we started the IGDA, I should have my first IGDA picture up, first CGD, the Game Developers Conference picture up here. But I think one of the coolest things about our community as a whole is that we're really open. So even though we're all competing, we're all cooperating all the time. We're all sharing knowledge. We're all sharing our ideas. Even, people mostly don't come and say, wow, I don't want to talk to anybody in the gaming business because they might steal my idea. Because they know it's damn hard to make ideas into games, right? That's not the ideas are not the currency, even though at the end, they are. It's the idea that is the genesis, but it's the execution that actually matters. And it's really hard to execute most of these ideas. So, in the end, we want great ideas, but we have to have great execution or it doesn't work. So don't stop yourself, from sharing what you're doing, because that's part of what makes our community super special. If you ever have worked around other creative communities, like in Austin, we have a big film thing, right? There's like a big film community. And the film guys their whole attitude is, if there's a nickel on the table, if you get it, I don't, right? So like everybody's scrabbling over the amount of work that's available. And in games, everybody's talking about what they're all creating, right? They're making new stuff. They're not fighting over the same stuff with each other, so we're more likely to be cooperative. And I think that's a huge competitive advantage for our industry, that people talk to each other and that people share their knowledge really freely, because we want the whole business to get better, because when the business gets better, we all do better. The bigger the ecosystem, the better it is for all of us. So don't lose that part of gaming, please. When you know what the future's going to be, or at least have an idea what the future's going to be, which is mostly done by getting the context, by actually talking to your peers, by actually studying the business along the way, you're more likely to be able to judge where to be a year from now or 2 years from now. Our developments, timelines for most games are long enough to where we can't adequately predict the future that we're going to publish our games in, that the game's going to come out in. Because, again, technology is changing and the customers are changing while we're building our game. So we have to change our games quite often in midstream, because we find out, something's changed and now the landscape has changed. Something is really cool and it's not in our game at all. We have to have that cool feature in our game. Or, somebody's changed the underlying hardware we're on dramatically. We have to change our game. Or a new platform has come along that we're going to have to put our game on. All these happen in midstream in development. And so the more you know about the industry, the more likely you are to see those early enough to react to them rather than at the last minute when they happen. All right. So not very many people work for large companies. Most people here are working for smaller companies. And how many people are working in a company that's under 5 people? Okay, under 10 people? Under 15? Under 20? Oh, wow, it's really spread out. That's awesome. I was expecting a lot more smaller teams, but I think it's cool that there's such a big diversity in the size of teams. Getting that first job, so almost everyone in here is working on games. Getting that first job is the hardest, even if you make it up on your own to do a game. But once you have a couple of jobs in gaming, you're going to get more discriminatory. You're going to look at a job and go, well, I need a job, but maybe that job's not the right job, right? And the more people you work for, so I've worked for a lot of people, so I'm almost unemployable because I can look at most game jobs and go, that's not going to work out, right? It's going to be bad. Something terrible is going to happen in this particular thing because of either the game that's being done, or the management it's under, or the fundamental company underneath it. Or in many cases, the thing that blocks me from taking a job is the company culture. I look at the culture and I go, wow, I'm not a good fit for this culture. It's not a culture that I buy into. I don't want to be part of it. Even if I love the work and I love the people I work with, I'm fighting against the culture of the company because I don't want to be whoever the company culture wants me to be in that culture. So over time, it's been more difficult as I've done more things. I'm more discriminatory. I just don't want to work. Even though I may go, wow, that team is fabulous. I really want to work with that team. I've done that where I went to a great team inside of a company that wasn't a great company, right? And so I don't want to do that anymore. I want to make sure that we do this because of passion. If you're going to do passionate work, you might as well make sure that your passion is fully expressed, not suppressed by the company that you happen to be in, or the team you happen to be around, or the game you're working on. So I see people in our business who take jobs working on games that they don't actually like, and it's soul crushing for them. It's not good for them. So if you're going to be in a passion-based business, make sure you find a place where that passion gets to be expressed freely. And as you learn more, you will be more discriminatory about who you work with and where you work and what kind of games you work on, because that's natural. Always learn from the people you work with. And again, always be picking up the best ones. Like, ooh, that's the best animator I've ever worked with. That person is awesome. I want that person on every game I ever work on from now on if I can get them, right? Or, great programmers or great designers, great creative directors. They're all really hard to find, the best of the best. And so as you work with people, you're going to find out who's the best of the best. And you want to make sure that you find a way to either follow them or recruit them where you go, as your career advances, because that'll make your job much easier. What else? Eventually, you're going to be working for yourself. I have to tell you, almost certainly, our business is so chaotic. You see some monolithic companies that are mostly left over from when we had stable distribution. So we're in the middle of a giant disaggregation, just like music went through, only more slow motion and more painful because of that, of distribution being disaggregated, meaning that anybody can distribute anywhere. And it used to be we needed the publishers to get to the brick and mortar places that sold games. They had the lock on that. Those brick and mortar places only wanted to work with big guys, so we had to go to big guys to get our boxes on the shelves. And when the internet came along, slowly but surely, it's been destroying that, where anybody can publish anywhere. The new big guys are the App Store and the Steam and the Amazon and Twitch and everybody else who wants to take 30% of your money and do nothing for you. So nothing to promote your game. They're just going to take the money because you happen to use their platform. The people who are going to win that war eventually are the people who either charge less or do more for you, right? Eventually that's going to, because they're all the same right now, eventually the competition will change that. But you need to be ready as you work places, even if you're working for yourself now, think about what's your next, how are you going to do this again? In the company you're in now, no matter how small or large it is, you probably know everything that's wrong with it and you know everything that's right with it. And you think to yourself every once in a while, wow, if I was running this company, I'd do it differently. Even if you're the guy running the company, right? You're having these thoughts, right? Because once a company is kind of set, it's got a culture, and it's very hard to change it, even from the top. So, these are learning experiences. Learn from them, use them the next time around, because things will change. Game companies come and go. I have worked for probably over 20 game companies in aggregate. Maybe not quite that many, but a lot. And the reason is that game companies are very volatile. They, sometimes they're up and sometimes they're down. The bigger companies, when your project's over, if they don't want to do another one, they get rid of you, and you were totally important until the moment that the game shipped, and now you're not important anymore. So the main thing is your skills are what are your full employment policy. The more skilled you are, the more valuable you are as a team member, the more employable you are, and on any team you want to go to. And if you have this group of people around you who are also the same way, maybe you guys can figure out how to start a company. You got to find a business guy, though, which is really a pain in the butt, I have to tell you. So again, it's really a long-term thing, right? In the midst of making games, we really think about the sprint, right? We're making this game, we got to get to the end, we got to get it done. We finally get it done, we stumble over the finish line, we're finished, and then we go, wait, what are we going to do next? And then you get all excited about the next thing to build, and you do another sprint. But really, all these sprints are really a long marathon. You're going to be running a long time. So you do need to pace yourself a little bit. You need to understand that while every game's important, what's most important is that you have a good time along the way and that you do stuff that matters, that you're working on things that really feed your soul at the same time as they're feeding you and your family, right? That you have to, in the creative business, if you're not getting that feedback that feeds you, you're going to burn out and you're going to say, I'd rather do anything else but games. And we have a big burnout problem in gaming for just that reason. People don't get their emotional and kind of creative needs satisfied, and they fall out of the gaming business because of that. It's like a bad relationship, right? You get divorced from gaming, from building games, and you can't go back to it. So I think, you need to be aware of that. You need to be taking care of your own well-being. Don't expect the companies to do it. You have to take care of your own well-being along the way. All right. What's the end? Shit happens, it changes, it's going to continue to change a lot, right? And that means you've got to be ready to change all the time. Not just, the world's going to change, you've got to change with it, or you're going to, be standing in the wrong place at the wrong time. Embrace those changes. Don't resist the change. Figure out a way to get in front of the change. Anybody here surf? You know what I mean by surfing? Okay, nobody surfs. All right, well, it's about getting in front of the wave, not letting the wave whack you, which is, standing against the waves is a good way to get whacked. What you want to be is in front of the wave and let the wave carry you all the time. And then find those great people and really enjoy that journey. And you can reach me anytime, and I want to take a lot of questions. So thank you. I haven't even talked about the most terrible part of doing your own company, which is raising money, by the way. All right, I'm going to start with this young lady. We need a mic. Everybody on the front rows, and then somebody way in the back has their hand up. That's going to make the mic guy have to work hard.
Thank you. So you've been in the industry for a long time, and there's a lot of games, and it's very rare that you get the really unique ideas. Do you have a line that you would draw on how similar a game idea can be to another game before you make it?
Okay, so
Difficult question, maybe.
No, not really. I mean, here's the challenge. I would make the exact same game if I thought I could sell it. That would be so much easier. But it never happens that way, right? What the players want is they want familiar with novelty, right? They don't actually want to learn a whole new game. What they want is a game that they can immediately play, but it has something in it that draws them and is novel for them and will get them excited. So in our business, you can't really deliver the same experience over and over again. You've got to do some kind of orthogonal change or some kind of fusion that suddenly makes a game different while still feeling comfortable enough for them to say, oh, I can master this, but I'm enjoying mastering it because it's different. When you make the same game over, the players pattern match on it really quickly and they burn out and they say they call the game terrible. If it was exactly the same as a game that they totally enjoyed, they would call that game terrible because they've already played that game and it's not new for them. All right, I'll get the guy way in the back and then I'll come back up front. Did somebody Nope, hand is not up again. Okay, this gentleman over here then. Oh. Where?
Yeah.
Oh,
here.
go. There he is.
What was the first device that you made a game for that actually published, and what was your greatest struggle
Commodore
there?
PET. First game was done on a Commodore PET, 8K Commodore PET in 1977. So a really long time ago. That first game was the first 2 games were in BASIC, and the next couple of games were mostly in assembler. So back when I was a real programmer. I'd programmed for about 25 years. And then one day I said, I'm either going to be a programmer or I'm going to be a manager, because if I do both, I'm going to suck at both. So because I'm not really going to suck. I'm just not going to be great at either. And so I thought I would actually focus my career on management about 1999. And so I actually gave up programming. Also, when you're a manager that programs, it's intimidating to the other programmers if you're any good at anything. So in fact, it's better to pretend you're incompetent and let those people do their tricks. So so now I actually am incompetent. I had to stop programming for about 10 years to where I'm totally useless. Next. Oh, sorry.
Hello. I love that you have survived so long in the game industry.
Me too. Jesus.
Yeah, right? It's great. But everyone, of course, has their own ways to run the marathon. What are your ways to survive or like enjoy the marathon?
I think a lot of it is not sweating. One, being confident in your own abilities is really important, because the world is not always going to validate you, right? The world is not always going to tell you you're awesome or whatever, right? But you have to be confident that you're doing the right things for the right reasons. Because I've gotten plenty of negative feedback. I've been fired before, and I've enjoyed being fired both times, because I knew, I knew I was going to get fired because I was doing something that, I almost wanted to be fired at some level, because in the end, you're either doing stuff that feeds you internally or you're not, right? And so there's things that I'll do and there's things I won't do, kind of ethically, morally. So there's some of that, right? But there's also, is what I'm working on worthwhile? Is it worth bringing to the marketplace? I personally, why do I make games at all? I've always thought I made games to fuck with people's heads. That's the way I think of making games, is I'm fucking with the people's heads out there. And whether, and I'm entertaining them, but I'm actually making them think about stuff or experience stuff in a way that they wouldn't have if they didn't have the game. So to me, winning is fucking with more people's heads, is when I make a game. So that's my personal motivation. And so you need a personal motivation to kind of get past all the stuff that life is going to throw at you, which is not so pretty. I hope that answered that question.
That's good. Thanks.
That gentleman next to him, and then we'll bring it up here. Nope. Does somebody already have a mic? Oh, hello. There you go. Speak up.
About your
I can't see the mic all the time.
Yeah, I was wondering about your opinions about Kickstarting. At what point would you say it's okay to push your game out on Kickstarter or early access?
What is it?
So
I'm trying to come up with the right quote about Kickstarting. It's the worst thing to do except for everything else, right? It's no, I mean Kickstarting is interesting, right? The key to Kickstarting is this, and this is the simplest thing I can tell you. Don't kickstart unless you can bring your own crowd. Don't crowdfund unless you have a crowd already. The Kickstarter ecosystem, the Indiegogo ecosystem, is not a crowd for you. It's an add-on crowd. You have to have your own crowd first. And then the people that are in that ecosystem, if they see your crowd buying into you, will also buy in. There isn't a ready-made audience out there waiting for you. You have to build that audience. That's the real key to Kickstarter, because a lot of people, you see 2/3 of all game Kickstarters fail completely. And the reason that is people think that Kickstarter is the audience for their game. And that's not true. You have to find your own audience first to kickstart your game. And then that Kickstarter audience, for most people, is a 20 to 30% add-on audience on top of yours, is what happens. If you're successful with your audience, they see you pop up on the list, and then they add it, they jump into. And like Kickstarter is just like the App Store, though, right? A whole bunch of games get put up every day. Nobody knows about them. They only know about them because your audience, if they buy in on the first or second day, push you up in the rankings to where you get seen by everybody else. So did we enjoy doing our Kickstarter? Yes and no. The closest thing I can say to a Kickstarter, the month of Kickstarter, was just like an MMO launch. So an MMO launch is like the worst thing you would ever do to yourself. And a Kickstarter campaign is pretty much the same level of intensity and level of challenge because the audience is 24/7 and they want to be interactive with very aggressively. So for us, it worked, but were we nervous when we did it? You bet. We had no idea if it would work on day one. We had no idea. So we did everything we could to make sure it would work, but we didn't know. This gentleman back here.
Thank you. Thank you for a great talk. And I come from a company called Window Liquor Games, and we're working on a VR game project right now. And I wondered if you had any thoughts about the VR technology and VR in gaming, because there's a lot saying in both sides.
I'm an old curmudgeon, and as far as I can tell, this is the fourth wave of VR that I've seen, since I started making games. This wave has been the best and biggest wave, and it's gotten closer to the shore than any other wave. But the truth is today, so I'm also crassly commercial. Took me a long time to get there, but now I'm totally crassly commercial, which means I want to make money every time I make a game. And today there's not a big enough audience to pay for VR games. So almost all VR work is subsidized by somebody to make it happen to where, and the hopes that the audience will grow to it. And there just isn't a large enough install base to support the development costs, which are not insubstantial for VR. It's the highest end stuff you could be working on. So I'm totally happy you're doing that. I totally hope you can figure out how to raise the money to do it. And I totally hope you can last long enough for the audience to grow big enough. But because there's a huge future in that stuff. I'm too old to be doing that crap, and I get motion sick on everything that's out right now. So I am the perfect test case for all VR hardware so far. So I wish I was younger because I would be messing around with it, frankly. But I'm not ready to do that level of learning curve and that level of suffering to get to commercial today. So, because I've done plenty of suffering to get to commercial on other platforms. So now I tend to concentrate on platforms where I know I can find an audience and I know I can make money because I am crassly commercial. Every time. All right. Who has the other mic?
Hello.
There we go.
Hi. I was wondering, because you talked about how Steam and all other places and platforms took 30% of the money for the games. So I was wondering what makes you choose which platform to publish your games on? Like, what are your what makes you decide which one, and which one would you ideally prefer to do it, even if other things might change it?
So if I was making a PC standalone or a light multiplayer game today, I would probably use Steam because it still is a marketplace and you still can reach the customers easier there. And I would eat the cost of that. The cost of it is the cost of doing business, right? For Steam, because they're so dominant a platform for the PC platform. I'm doing a massively multiplayer game. I don't want to give Steam 30% of my money and have them in front of my customer, in between me and my customers. So we literally have no Steam plan. We're the weirdest PC game in the world because we have zero Steam plan because I don't want anything to do with them for as long as I possibly can. Will I eventually be on Steam? Yes, after I've gotten every single person who will come to me directly, I'll get first before I ever go to Steam, because there's no reason to give Steam that money for what I happen to be doing now. But again, for every type of game, for every class of game, for every platform of game, you need to look at the available options and just make a rational choice for where you are as a business and where you are with the game that you have. You want the place where you're going to get the most people to see it and play it. So it's not religious choice. It's totally a rational choice about where you want to go to distribute your games. I hope I answered your question. Okay. Where's the other mic? Oh.
I was wondering, what do you think is the best way to stand out in such a diverse and still saturated market like the gaming market?
Well, the ways to stand out are legion. Mostly they have to do with either being outrageous or naked or something, right? You got to do something to get people's attention. Normally that means doing something different. So one of the challenges, the other big challenge with Kickstarter, for example, is you can't kickstart something I can go buy somewhere else. So in fact, the only thing that should be on Kickstarter are things that are unique in their approach. They're a unique kind of a game that can't get normal backing of some, a publisher would never buy them because they're too risky, perhaps. That's the kind of stuff. So doing risky stuff is one way to get attention. Being outrageous in any way is a way to get attention. I think there's a book called Marketing Outrageously or Outrageous Marketing. It might be worth looking at. Because when you're a little guy and you don't have anything else, you have to find a way to rise above the noise because you have no money to do it, right? You don't have huge amounts of cash. So you need to be doing something that will get people's attention. And those ways are legion. There's a million ways to get attention, and some of them are not that great, but you'll get attention. And I think that that's a challenge for everybody making a product. How do you make people know your product exists? Why should they buy it? Why is it unique? Why is it interesting? And so you're hitting on one of the core points that makes marketing valuable. I've done a lot of study of marketing, even though I have nothing. I've never been a marketer, but I sure try to know a lot about it because without marketing, I can't be successful. Without positioning my product correctly, I can't be successful. Without making people know about my product, I can't be successful. So knowing how to market and sell, or at least knowing about those skills, is really, really critical. And what you're mostly talking about is positioning. How do I make my product unique and get people to notice it before I start really marketing and selling it? I've got to get people to even notice that I'm there. So I was serious. You could just get naked, and then people will go, "It's the naked guy's product," right? But you've got to do something pretty outrageous to get people to notice. Next person. Okay.
So you've been in the business for almost 40 years, and I was wondering, that's a long time being in a creative business, and I was wondering where you find the motivation or your source for creativity, or maybe you heard something from other people because you have a lot of experience.
Too dumb to quit. That's the first reason. Not very bright. Not very bright. Didn't know when to stop when I should have stopped. That's part of it. And the other part is, I think, after you've done something long enough, you're not good for anything else. So I'm good for nothing except for making games at this point. But the truth is, if you're not getting energy back from it, you shouldn't be doing it. So I try to make sure I put myself in positions where, as I'm feeding energy into what I'm doing, I'm getting a return in energy from it. And I know that's a little metaphysical or whatever, but literally I think of it as that thing. Like, I need to be getting gratification out of what I'm doing since I'm putting a lot of energy into it. And so I don't think I would still be doing this if I didn't get some gratification back in pretty equal measure to what I'm putting out or more. So again, in your own life, remember, we are truly blessed. Everybody in here working on games, really blessed. Most people work for a living, right? They work to get money, to live, and to do stuff that they like. We're actually working on stuff we like, right? We're not working for a living, we're living to work. And that's a totally different approach to life that the vast majority of humanity doesn't get to share in. So I'd like to think of myself as blessed to do that, at the same time thinking I'm too dumb to do anything else. So, next.
Hi, up here.
Okay.
I was wondering, back when you started making games, the business, like making games, it wasn't that popular, certainly as not as popular as it is now. So what was your and your team's motivation to keep making games, even if like a lot of people didn't think it would be a thing back then?
Okay, so how many people in here are programmers? Okay, a good number, about 30%. Okay, so when I got out of, when I was learning to program and started making games, part of programming back then was like you had to document your code and do all this work around coding. But not just coding, right? You had to do a whole bunch of other work around the coding because you were typically doing applications for business or something where you had to really document what you were doing. And a very highly productive programmer would write 100 lines of code a day or something, some crazy number like that. And I like to write like 2,000 lines of code a day or something like that. So I didn't want to document my code. I didn't want to do anything that serious. I got job offers to work on the space shuttle or to work on, doing, cruise missile software to make them blow up, people in other countries, and all these other kind of jobs, right? Where when I got out of college, that I could have taken, and I thought I don't want to do anything that serious. I want to do something totally frivolous, where I'm having a good time doing it. And for the first probably 10 years of making games, I made less than the then current American minimum wage, because I worked, twice the hours for about that money, right? Just working, because I was working for myself and it was contract, and you never knew if you get paid or not. So I just didn't want to do anything. I wanted to do stuff that, that I liked doing more than I wanted to do stuff that was serious and, where I could make really big money and all that stuff. So it was more of a passion thing for me. So again, I'm not advising that this is a good idea. It just happened to be where I was at the time, because I'd already been in the military. I was an adult already before I even went to college. So, at that time I went, hey, I want to, this is not real life. I want to stick with the not real life part for as long as humanly possible. So I hope that answered your question. I'm not a good object example for anybody on this stuff. Yes.
Hey, just when just looking at all the games and such you showed us at the very first slide, like I'm a big.
That's not all of them. That's just a few.
I know, it's not all of them. But just the first Star Wars: The Old Republic, I'm a big fan of that series, and just see like when it was released, I think I just bought it from day one.
Which game?
Star Wars: The Old Republic.
Oh yeah.
I bought it on day one when it came out, and I played it a lot since then. But every time a new update comes out, I feel like the player base goes down. Mm-hmm. You say it changed like games, you have to learn new stuff. The same goes for the developers. Do you feel like that when a game changes as well, the game base also drops because of a game change?
Well, with an online game, if you don't change the game, the player base goes down. If you change the game in the right way, the player base either stays the same or grows. If you don't change the game the right way, sometimes you lose more people than you gain, right? So it's a tricky thing doing live games. You literally can't leave a live game static and keep your audience, because the audience wants the change. It's the nature of that particular genre of games. So it's doing live games is very tricky. I've done several, and sometimes I've managed to grow them, and sometimes I haven't, depending on which game it was. So there's still a lot of magic to it rather than determinism, right? There's not like a checklist that you do and it's going to work. Who's up there? Who's next?
Here.
Okay.
You mentioned a lot that people get burned out by games, by making games.
Game makers, yeah.
Game makers. Would you say you're just as passionate about making games and playing games now as you were in your younger days?
Totally not as passionate about playing games. Playing games is totally ruined for me. I cannot play a game it's been probably 10 or 15 years since I've been immersed in a game, right? So it's like I can still get immersed in an occasional movie because I don't make movies. If I made movies, I wouldn't be able to watch movies either, because it ruins it for you. Am I still as passionate about making games? Probably, but it's more well-informed passion. Might be the better way. I know too much to be quite as passionate about it. And, as you get older, you get less passion maybe too, because you're all worn out and shit. So, but the truth is I still do it because it still gives me energy back, right? So it's actually still positive for me to make games. I still get a thrill out of building a team that's building a game, watching the game come together, nudging it here and there. I don't get to design the games. I don't get to build the games anymore. What I do is get to build a team that builds a game and make sure that team runs well. So I'm more facilitating making games than making games myself anymore. I still get to, touch them a little bit, but the harder I touch them, the worse it is for the people making it. So I need them to make the game, not me to make the game for them. So it's a little tricky as you get older. Next up there. Or where's the other mic? Nope.
Hi.
Oh, where?
Over here.
Oh, okay. Go. We were alternating, now we're all up here. Okay.
Okay. Since you've seen most of it, I'm curious about what you think is the technology that has made the biggest impact in the gaming world.
Ooh, that's a good question. So, after a while, in the beginning, we always were shocked when the CPU went up and then the storage went up. Like every time we go, oh, this is great. And then all of a sudden it would double again or quadruple or whatever, right? It would be, and then we go, oh, crap, now what are we going to do? We got to fill all that stuff up, right? So it was a lot easier when the platforms were more contained because, creativity, if you box it in, you have to kind of be more creative with a smaller play space, right? Because you don't have as many things to work with. As it got bigger and bigger, it was like, we don't have to be creative. We just have to shove more stuff in, right? We have to put more content in. And so which one has made the biggest difference would be the internet, totally, right? So the internet changed everything, because it actually made gaming the way it has always been. So gaming traditionally, there's solitaire and maybe two other examples of one-player games in the whole world, right? So gaming by its very nature is communal. It's multi-person. And so suddenly the internet made all gaming multi-person again. So we're actually back to the roots of gaming now, rather than the single-player game stuff is an anomaly which has existed in a very small time period. So doesn't mean that single-player games are going away. Now that we can make games that are single-player games, well, there'll always be single-player games. But the roots of gaming have always been multi-person. And so the internet has made the biggest difference, both from distribution standpoint and from a game mechanic standpoint, over anything else I've seen along the way. And I've seen it all, right? All that stuff that's come. And every time it felt a little revolutionary, right? Moving from a couple 100K of floppy to, a CD-ROM of 610, K was huge, right? 610 megabytes was huge. But, and then we went to DVD. Oh, boom, you're giant again. So the content helps, and the CPUs are just, phenomenal. When I was programming on my pet computer in 1977, it was as powerful as an early 1970s mainframe, right? So literally I had the same computing power already then as what a mainframe, the guys that were in a giant air-conditioned room didn't have the same CPU power as my little pet. So, the world has just changed dramatically in all those things. But the real sea change shift was the internet. That's what changed everything. Just like drone warfare is about to change warfare like gunpowder changed warfare, several hundred years ago. So these massive shifts come from time to time. Next.
Yeah, hi. I was just wondering, as a person with quite a lot of experience, do you prefer working on multiplayer or single-player type games?
So in 1995, I moved to multiplayer gaming when I went to Kesmai, which was one of the early multiplayer game companies. They'd actually been around since the early 80s, making multiplayer games in obscurity when it wasn't cool. And at that time, I had about 18 years of making single-player games, and I was kind of burned out, to tell you the truth. I knew exactly how to get a game to market. I knew the rules. I knew all the rules about how to do standalone box games at that point. I felt like I had mastered it, and it wasn't as interesting or enlivening for me because I knew how it was going to work every time. I knew all the rules, and I knew how to work the situation to ship games like that. And so the multiplayer games actually gave me a whole new lease on life with making games, because we didn't know all the rules, and we still don't know all the rules of making online games. So I enjoy that discovery part as part of my energy return, is working on stuff where I'm learning something every time. If I ever felt I knew everything about it, I would stop and do something else immediately from a personality standpoint. So I hope that answered your question. Who's next? Oh, we have to stop. Good. Well, bad. Everybody who asks a question, come get something. If you want my card, come down and see me. It's break time, right? Awesome.
Yep.
All right.
Thank you so much, Gordon.
You're welcome.
Yeah.